Look now at how this deal might impact the region. I want to bring in Firas Maksad. He's a senior fellow, senior director at the Middle East Institute. Good to have you on. I wonder, I'm going to begin with you the way I began with Jonathan Conricus. What do you think made, and again, this is if the deal gets across the finish line, and that remains an open question, but if it does, given the recent progress, what do you think made the difference this time? And is it as simple as Donald Trump saying, get the deal done?
It's a great question, Jim, and it's one that everybody in our space is asking. Certainly, when you look at the details of the deal itself, there's stark similarities to what was on the table back in spring, even back in July. And so that's why a lot of people are asking that question. I do think that the political timeline in Washington is a major factor. I was just in the region. I just came back, meetings with some senior officials there. And I could tell you, I mean, we literally ran into the envoys of both President Biden and President Trump going in and out, meeting with these officials. There is very close, unexpected coordination between the two camps here in Washington for their own political interests. President Biden very much wanting to be seen as having achieved something in the Middle East, a ceasefire of sorts leaving. President Trump laser focused on the Middle East, of wanting that deal of the century, really the Abrahamic Accords, the normalization between the Arabs and the Israelis, kept bigger and better with Saudi Arabia and others now. And for that, he needs calm and quiet in Gaza, and he needs calm and quiet in Lebanon. And so we see both sides of the political divide pushing here. But I would also say that there's a regional component.
Sure.
Iran today is the weakest that I've ever seen. And so maybe the Israeli prime minister hasn't been able to achieve much and move the needle in Gaza, but with the defeat of Hezbollah in Lebanon, the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, those are all creating openings. And Hamas is looking around and saying, Iran and Hezbollah, they're not joining the fight anytime soon, maybe never.
Yeah.
And that's conducive of
So you describe the ambition of a second Trump term there, of that broader agreement. And as you know, the read prior to October 7th is that normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel was quite close, and October 7th blew that up. Are the conditions in place, assuming this deal with Hamas gets through, to resurrect that normalization? And could it go more broadly than that?
Yeah, it's going to be a major aim of the Trump administration, no doubt. He's got 4 years only to achieve that. From a Saudi perspective, I was in Riyadh 2 weeks ago. I could tell you that the bar is that much higher. Saudi Arabia has a real public opinion to contend with, unlike some of the smaller Arab states that have normalized with Israel. The Gaza situation, the horrible footage of human suffering playing out on TV screens for the past 15 months, they have to take that into account. I do think there's still a possibility it might be a colder peace than the one achieved between, for example, the UAE and Israel. I don't think that you're going to see Israeli tourists shuttling back and forth or airliners going back and forth. Maybe a colder peace. But the bigger challenge here is going to be on President Trump, because a key component of that normalization deal is the defense treaty for Saudi Arabia. Will President Trump be able to get enough Democrats in the Senate to certify a treaty? That's an open question, and I think it's going to be a heavy lift on the incoming administration, but they're going to try.
Regarding Gaza, there are no current commitments on the second and third phases. Negotiations for a second phase, they only begin until the 16th day of the ceasefire, if it were to last that long. But that also leaves open the broader question of what happens to Gaza in the future. What happens to the West Bank? Will there still be any viable path for a Palestinian state, which traditionally has been the demand of, say, Saudi Arabia before it normalizes with Israel? They want to see at least a path there. I mean, there's a long distance between where we are right now and getting to that point. I mean, is that a bridgeable gap?
And thank you for bringing that up, because that is exactly, I'll use that word, the bridge between the ceasefire agreement that we're hoping and talking about today and the aspirations of the incoming Trump administration for normalization in the region, with Saudi Arabia and Israel being at the head of that. You need to be able to make progress towards a two-state solution and the creation of a Palestinian state the day after question in Gaza. Secretary Blinken today obviously outlined his views and his views in that regard. I would take that with a grain of salt. I think Clearly the administration is on its way out.
Yep.
It's no telling what President Trump has in mind for the day after in Gaza. But I could tell you from the perspective of the Arab partners, the Arab partners of America, that there's going to be great hesitancy in getting involved in Gaza, whether at a security level, putting boots on the ground, or throwing in those billions of dollars that are required for reconstruction. If there isn't a real change in how Israel is dealing with the Palestinians, and also amongst the Palestinians, the reform of the Palestinian Authority, which is riddled with corruption, as you know.
No question. Looking north now, the Israeli-Lebanon 60-day ceasefire, that comes to an end next week. Under that agreement, Israel is supposed to withdraw its troops from southern Lebanon, although now you hear Israeli officials saying they want to keep forces in some key areas. It's not unlike the debate you saw prior to these Gaza negotiations, right, wanting to keep that presence here. Does that ceasefire get extended in your view?
Let me just say, Jim, that I understand the Israeli concern. I understand post-October 7th trauma. I understand that the geography of South Lebanon, where you have sort of the first tier of villages overlooking Israeli settlements and Israeli towns, I understand the security concern there. I don't think that a continued occupation of these villages or South Lebanon would offer a solution. I think that would only embolden the Hezbollah narrative of Israeli wanting to stay in Lebanon, even though Hezbollah has been much weakened. There's an important role there for the Lebanese armed forces to play, particularly on those key border villages that geographically pose a challenge to Israel. We saw the election of a president in Lebanon that is American-backed last week, the appointment of a prime minister that is also anti-Hezbollah in his views. There's a moment here in Lebanon. There's an American two-star general that is based in the Lebanese Ministry of Defense as a result of the ceasefire agreement. We need to create the space for the Lebanese Authority to be able to stand up on that border. And I don't think continued Israeli occupation will do that.
I've been up to that border area frequently, and you can see those firing positions, and you understand, to your point, the Israeli argument there. Firas, Maksad, thanks so much. Coming up next.